Hello and welcome. I'm Sima Katauka and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. US President Donald Trump signals restraint on Iran, saying he hopefully won't need military action and plans direct talks. While Pentagon officials affirm readiness in Europe, the EU brands Iran's Revolutionary Guards as terrorist group, sparking protests in Brussels and warnings from EU leaders that the region can't afford another war. US President has declared a national emergency and warned of tariffs on nations like Mexico that provide oil to Cuba, escalating the trade tensions. Thailand's reformist politician Nathabon emerges as frontrunner in polls ahead of the February vote, signaling potential shifts in the country's political landscape. After meeting with potential candidate Kevin Warsh, US President Donald Trump has confirmed he will reveal his pick for federal chair today amid calls for rate cuts. Following US pressure, the ruling aims to shift control over the strategic waterway, marking a significant geopolitical development. China warns to take appropriate measures. US financial markets see extreme volatility as sharp swings in gold and silver equities lead to $9 trillion movement in capitalization. Trump continues trade war with Canada with renewed threats of decertifying Canadian-made aircraft and charge a 50% tariff on those planes. Towns in Australia's southeast swelter in temperature close to 50 degrees Celsius as wildfires rage through parts of rural Victoria. Now for this hour, we start with US President Donald Trump officially nominated Kevin Warsh to succeed Jerome Powell as the chair of the Federal Reserve. Warsh, who is a former Federal Reserve governor, is set to replace Powell, whose term was marked by frequent clashes with President Trump over interest rate policies. President Trump has praised Warsh on his Truth Social, calling him a longtime acquaintance and predicting he would be one of the great Fed chairmen known as an inflation hawk. Warsh has aligned with Trump's push for lower borrowing costs and a smaller balance sheet at the Fed. Following the announcement, the US dollar strengthened and Treasury yields rose while gold and Bitcoin prices dropped. However, Warsh's nomination faces a challenging confirmation process in the Senate, with Republican Senator Thom Tillis vowing to block any Fed nominations until a Justice Department investigation into Powell's handling of central bank renovation is resolved. Warsh was chosen from a short list that included National Economic Council Director Kevin Hassett, Fed Governor Christopher Waller, and BlackRock executive Rick Rader. Now for this, we welcome Mr. David K. Johnston. He's an author and journalist, joins us live from New York. Thank you very much, Mr. Johnston, for joining us. Good to see you. Now, looking at this, why do you think Trump has chosen this particular Mr. Kevin Warsh?
Well, I don't know anything about him of any consequence. But what I can assure you is Donald is appointing someone who will do whatever he wants. Donald has made it very clear that he believes that he is all-powerful. He says the only limits on what he does are his own morality. And that, of course, not at all what the American Constitution says, not within a mile of what it limits that it puts on him. But he wants lower interest rates. Trump has been the man throughout his life who's been a borrower, not a saver. Lower interest rates, he believes, will juice the economy. So Jerome Powell, who Trump appointed 10 years ago and whose term ends in May as president of the Fed, not as a member of the board, but as president, has done what he thinks is best for the legal mandate that the Fed have stable currency and full employment. Those two things can be tensions against each other. But whoever Trump was going to pick, I think he made very clear, would be someone who would say, yes, sir, you want lower interest rates, we're going to lower them. The problem with that theory is that the Fed president does not independently determine this. There's a board that sets the two interest rates that are controlled by the Federal Reserve Bank of the United States.
So how dangerous is it that, President Trump is pushing someone, putting someone who aligns completely with his policies?
Oh, I think this is potentially very destabilizing for the U.S. economy and for other countries around the world. We're already seeing, because of Trump's actions, a number of nations have been dumping their dollars, their securities in dollars like American treasuries, treasury bonds, because they're uncertain about what's going on with the United States. And the Chinese have been big beneficiaries of this. They would like to establish the renminbi as the yuan, as the world reserve currency. Being the world reserve currency is an enormous, enormous financial benefit to the United States. It's a subsidy to Americans. Trump has no understanding of this whatsoever. All he knows is, I'm all powerful, I will do what I want, when he's really the man behind the curtain in The Wizard of Oz.
Right. And then is this Trump's push a strategy to have lower interest and gain some votes as he approaches midterm?
Yes, absolutely. Trump believes that lower interest rates, particularly lower mortgage interest rates, will help mitigate the losses that everyone knows the Republicans are facing in the House of Representatives and possibly in the U.S. Senate. So the problem here is that a lot of the debt Americans carry is in fixed terms or at rates that are not influenced by the Fed. The Fed affects two interest rates, and Trump would like to go back to the period of zero interest rates, which we had after the collapse of the U.S. economy in 2007, 8, and 9.
So why is Trump pushing for zero interest rates? And also, what does this all mean for U.S.'s democracy?
Well, on the first part, lower interest rates would presumably encourage more investment that's financed with debt, including home building. The U.S. has a major shortage of houses, several million houses, but for reasons that largely are not about interest rates, they're about local land use or zoning laws. The current U.S. mortgage interest rate of 6%, during the 40 years I had mortgages, they were all at 6% or more, except during the zero interest period. On the broader, I'm sorry, your second part of the question was about the broader economic, it was about Trump's power.
Yes, democracy of U.S.
Yeah,
Yes.
I wrote back in February that we no longer live in a democracy. We live in a dictatorship that is busy concentrating power in the White House. And Trump has since confirmed that repeatedly. He has said, well, it would be good to have a dictator. Millions of people want to have a dictator. You know, a dictator would be a good thing. I run the U.S. and the whole world, and numerous other statements. And I would warn people as far back as 2011, if Trump ever gets to the White House, he will behave as a dictator. And he just hasn't fully consolidated his power. But if you watch what's happening in Minnesota, that is the future for the United States if Trump is able to fully consolidate his power. People will be swept off the streets for not committing any crime. They will be subject to armed goons who don't have badges and whose faces are covered. They will be brutalized. If you have medical needs and they pick you up, they will refuse to give you your medicine. And when you say, I'll die without it, they will. We have testimony to this effect under oath. They will laugh in your face.
Right.
That's what Trump is trying to do, is set up a total dictatorship. And by the way, he just posted in the White House lobby a picture of himself with Vladimir Putin.
Oh, well, that I did not know about. And lastly, what happens now that U.S. president seems to be surrounding himself with all the yes men around him?
Well, when you're in a position of authority, whether it's my wife, who's the CEO of a large organization, or you are an elected official, you really want to surround yourself with people who will tell you no, people who will challenge what you have to say, people who will say, that crosses a line, it's going to be politically unpopular, it will be counterproductive. And Trump does not surround himself with people like that. He is completely into yes men, yes sir, absolutely. In his first term, he had people who put restraints on him for those reasons. But in this term, it's enablers, enablers, and enablers.
Thank you for highlighting that, Mr. Johnston. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now, moving on, Russian President Vladimir Putin has received a personal request from U.S. President Donald Trump to hold strikes on Kyiv until February 1st, aiming to create a favorable environment for peace talks. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov has declined to provide further details on Russia's response. Ukraine has stated it would reciprocate by refraining from attacks on Russian energy infrastructure if Moscow stops its strikes during the current cold weather. The next round of trilateral peace talks between Russia, Ukraine, and the U.S. was scheduled in Abu Dhabi, though Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky indicated that the date and location may change. Now, for this discussion, we welcome back Mr. David K. Johnston. He's an author and journalist, joins us live from New York. Thank you very much, Mr. Johnston, for staying with us. Now, again, what is this, request? Why is this coming at this timing? Is this also a part of his strategy, Trump's strategy, to gain back some popularity or votes?
Well, first of all, Donald doesn't really have strategies. He lives in the moment. He's not a long-term thinker. He deals with tactics, short-run tactics, not long-run strategy. Asking the Russians to hold off for 3 days, which is what this boils down to, is pretty insignificant. The Russians have seen that this is going to not be the quick war they expected 4 years ago. It is rather a war of attrition. And so the longer they can drag this out, the greater they believe are the chances that they will eventually conquer. And that's what they're doing here. Conquer Ukraine, take away the freedom of the Ukrainians and put them under the Kremlin's boot, just as people were during the Soviet era. And Trump is so believing and trusting in Vladimir Putin that he has said he does not trust any of the American intelligence agencies, but he takes Vladimir Putin at his word. I mean, that is unbelievably naive and gullible. And the fact that he just put up this picture in the White House of himself with Vladimir Putin speaks volumes to the fact that without doubt, Donald Trump is regarded by the Kremlin as an asset. Whether or not he's an active agent is another question, but there is no doubt that he is seen by the Kremlin as an asset to them.
Right. And now that, Ukraine has Ukraine is not sure that where exactly will this next talks take place. Where do you think could be other than UAE?
Oh, it will be some neutral place where both the Russians and Ukrainians are comfortable and feel there's adequate security. You're not going to see any talks in Kiev or in Moscow. Security for both sides will be absolutely crucial. Vladimir Putin can't step outside of certain countries because he would be arrested as a war criminal. And Zelensky has to be concerned about his own safety because the Russians have a long history of assassinations. They, for example, killed the helicopter pilot who defected to Ukraine. He went off to live in Mexico and they hunted him down and murdered him. So security is going to be very important. And Trump's followers are, many of them, deeply troubled by what's going on here because he promised them no more wars. We're going to get out of these foreign entanglements. We're going to be America first. And that's not what they're seeing. They're seeing Trump saying, we're going to, if necessary, invade Cuba. We're going to take the Panama Canal. We're going to force Canada into becoming the 51st state. I don't expect any of those things to happen, but the bellicose nature of Donald Trump is coming very much to the fore because he has no constraints on him and no one around him telling him, hey, you're out of your lane. You were doing things that are extra constitutional. You need to pull it back. Nobody around him is telling him that.
With that, I would like to thank Mr. David K. Johnston for joining us today and sharing that insight. Now we move the focus on to Gaza. The world is being urged to step up aid to Gaza. The head of the International Committee of the Red Cross has said that states must act now. Mirjana Spoljaric says momentum from the first phase of the ceasefire must be used to ease dire humanitarian conditions. Meanwhile, Israel says the Rafah border crossing will reopen on 1st of February. It will allow travel between Gaza and Egypt, but only for residents who left during the war and only after Israeli security clearance. Rafah is Gaza's main gateway and the sole route for most of its more than 2 million people. Israel seized the crossing in May 2024. Its reopening follows the recovery of the last Israeli hostage's body and is part of the first phase of a US-backed ceasefire plan agreed in October last year. Now for this discussion, we welcome Mr. Yossi Cooper-Wasser. He's an Israeli intelligence and security expert, joins us live from Tel Aviv. Thank you very much, Mr. Yossi, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Now, looking at this Rafah border crossing, how significant will the reopening be, and what would it mean for both Israel, Egypt, and people in Gaza?
Well, I think first of all it's significant because it's simply a manifestation of the fact that the last hostage has been returned to Israel, and we can move forward towards implementing the second stage of the Trump plan for Gaza. And in the context of this plan, we are opening the crossing for people to cross both outside of Gaza and inside into Gaza. And yes, those who are going to cross into Gaza are going to go through inspection by, not directly, but indirectly by Israel, and to make sure that we don't see any terrorists coming in. But the way out is going to be free. And I hope that this is going to ease some of the pressures that the Gazan population are feeling throughout this war. And on top of that, I must say that what the head of the Red Cross was saying about the scarcity of humanitarian aid and food in Gaza is ridiculous. We allow 4,200 trucks every week to enter Gaza. The real problem in Gaza is that there is too much food, and it's kept by the Hamas in order to prevent pressures against them to disarm. That's the problem, because the core of the second stage of the plan is the disarming of Hamas and their removal from power. So the Palestinian technocratic government is already preparing to cross into Gaza this coming Sunday, and this is a nice move in the right direction. But Hamas is not willing to disarm, so it's only a partial move, and because Hamas refuses to disarm, there's no way to form the international stabilization force that is supposed to be responsible for security in the Gaza Strip, because no international body is ready to fight against Hamas. And this is the problem that we see right now, how we manage to convince Hamas to disarm.
Right. So how will that be possible? Like, what cards does the world have to dismantle Hamas or disarm Hamas?
Well, I think there are two leverages that can be put in place. One is that there is not going to be any reconstruction as long as Hamas doesn't disarm, and there's not going to be international powers coming to replace it. And that means that Hamas is responsible for the fact that there is no reconstruction of Gaza, because Israel is ready to allow reconstruction provided that Hamas disarms, and they refuse to do that. And the second leverage that we have is that we are ready, if necessary, to carry out a military operation to disarm Hamas by force. And we almost did it before the Trump plan was agreed upon. And this was the main reason why Hamas was ready to release the hostages, because they were afraid that we should go all the way and remove them from power and disarm them by force. And if necessary, we should be able to resume this threat. We are not trigger happy, but if necessary, we shall do what needs to be done.
Right. Thank you very much, Mr. Yossi, for sharing that insight. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now we stay in Gaza and Israel. Israel's military has reported that it has launched airstrikes overnight, killing 3 terrorists in the southern Gaza city of Rafah. This comes as a fragile ceasefire between Israel and Hamas remains in place. However, both sides have alleged repeated violations of the truce terms. The Israeli military has stated that it had identified 8 terrorists emerging from underground in Rafah and struck, eliminating 3 of them. Further operations continue in the area to remove any remaining threats. Humanitarian conditions in Gaza remain critical, with more than 2 million people affected by displacement and winter weather. The opening of the Rafah crossing is expected to allow limited movement and the entry of a Palestinian administrative committee to help oversee daily operations under the ceasefire. The second phase also includes the disarmament of Hamas, a process that has been met with resistance from the group. Israel is set to withdraw, with international peacekeepers set to replace them. Now for this, we welcome back Mr. Yossi Cooper-Rosser. He's an Israeli intelligence and security expert, joins us live from Tel Aviv. Thank you very much, Mr. Cooper-Rosser, for staying with us. Now, how do you analyze the readiness of phase 2?
Well, as I said, the incident in Rafah just tells you how fragile this ceasefire is in the first place. Hamas repeatedly tries to carry out terror attacks from the territories that they control, the 47% that they control of Gaza. But whenever it's possible for them to carry out attacks from the area that is under Israeli control, they are not shy about doing that too. That's what happened this last night. And we were attacked. So this entire ceasefire is very fragile. We want to move forward with the implementation of stage 2, but as long as Hamas is there and continues to articulate its commitment to fighting against Israel and destroying it, it's very hard to see considerable progress. And as I said, I think that as long as this is the case, we are going to continue to allow the entry of food and humanitarian aid, and we shall allow people to cross through the Rafah crossing. But we shall not allow any reconstruction, and the reconstruction is dependent on the readiness of Hamas to disarm or the disarmament of Hamas by other means.
Right. And do you think that U.S. and Israel has any disalignment now regarding the implementation of phase 2?
No, not at all. I think that the Americans see this issue eye to eye with Israel, and they repeatedly demand that Hamas will disarm. President Trump repeated this message just yesterday. And it's very clear to the Americans that disarming Hamas is a precondition for moving forward and implementing the reconstruction plan and the ideas of making Gaza into a flourishing area with tourism and Riviera and whatever have you. But this is not going to happen before Hamas is disarmed. And the Americans are totally on the same page with Israel.
With that, I would like
there are some other disagreements about the role of Turkey and Qatar in this. And that we disagree, but this is a different story.
Right. So why is there disagreement about Turkey and Qatar's involvement?
Because we consider Turkey and Qatar as supporters of Hamas. They host Hamas terrorists, they host Hamas commanders and leaders. They are members of, they are very close to the Muslim Brotherhood, that Hamas is the Palestinian branch of the Muslim Brotherhood. And they are interested in Hamas continuing to control Gaza. And yes, they are committed to the disarmament of Hamas because they promised the United States that this is what's going to happen. But they are trying all kinds of tricks in order to say one thing and do something else. And we cannot trust them because we know that they are very close to Hamas. The Americans say that they played an important role in convincing Hamas to release the hostages, and because of that, they got to have something in return. We are ready to live with Turkey and Qatar being members of the Board of Peace Executive Committee. But we don't want to let any troops from these countries deploy in the Gaza Strip.
With that, I would like to thank Mr. Cooper Russer for joining us today and sharing that insight. Now we move on to our tech news. Hackers and other criminals can easily take control of computers running open source large language models outside the guardrails and constraints of major artificial intelligence platforms, creating security risks and vulnerabilities. According to reports, hackers could target the computers running the LLMs and direct them to carry out spam operations, phishing content creation, or disinformation campaigns, evading platform security protocols, as per research carried out jointly by cybersecurity companies Sentinel and Sensis over the course of 293 days have offered a new window into the scale of potentially illicit use of cases for thousands of open source LLM deployments, and these includes hacking, hate speech and harassment, violent or gore content, personal data theft, scams and fraud, as well as in some cases child sexual abuses material. Thousands of open source LLM variants exist. A significant portion of the LLMs on the internet accessible hosts are variants of Meta's Llama, Google, DeepMind's Gamma, and others. Meanwhile, some of the open source models include guardrails. The researchers identified hundreds of instances where guardrails were explicitly removed. That's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.